Welcome to the Ramsey County Board Workshop. Today's workshop will be a presentation on advancing racial equity and shared community power strategic priority. Courtesy reminder that this board workshop is recorded and is live streamed on Zoom webinar. Oh, I didn't know that. Good to know. So there will be no votes taken during this workshop. So let's start with introduction of commissioners and presenters around the table, and then the rest of the room. So good morning, Rena Moran, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 4.
Tara Jevon Singh, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 1. My John, Commissioner for District 6.
Garrison McMurtry, Commissioner, District 3.
Kelly Miller, Commissioner for District 7.
Kristen Schultz, interim CHRO.
Lydia Garma, interim policy and planning director.
Angie Gunther, she, her pronouns, Race and Health Equity Administrator.
William Moore, Race and Health Equity Administrator, Serving Health and Wellness Services.
Veronica Jackson, Race and Health Equity Administrator for Economic Growth, Community Investments, and Safety and Justice.
Maria Saravia, Chief of Staff, former Racial and Health Equity Administrator.
Lynn Becker, County Manager.
Maybe Alex.
Alex is the interim deputy county manager. With pathways coordinator or coordination. Well-being and estimating and community coordinator.
Giovanni Ford, Network for the Development of Children of African Descent.
Alfreda Flowers, community member. Mary Kay Boyd, elder in the community. Jen Hammer, policy and planning.
Larry Zimmerman, Policy and Planning. James Hampton, Policy and Planning.
Scott Marshall, Heathen Pronouns, Resident Experience.
Danny Master, health and wellness, innovation and strategy. Donna Development, Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development, Human Resources. Sure name, DLD. Scarlett Gonzalez, Diversity, Inclusion, Organizational Development. Karen Francois, Deputy County Manager for the Information and Public Records Service.
Chris Ember, Racial and Health Equity Planner for Community Directions.
All right, and last. Yeah, you.
Kenneth Cutler, Racial Health Equity Planner, Community Directions.
All right, thank you. So this morning conversation is part of a series of board workshops that center our 7 countywide strategic priorities and lift up key initiatives that demonstrate how we do the intentional work of advancing our strategic plan. Today, we focus on racial equity and shared community power. Ramsey County and this board has been committed to ensuring that all residents have access to and receive what they need to thrive. And we do this in partnership with community. Part of this commitment is ensuring we are also addressing historical harms caused by government systems and structures that have led to disparities in outcomes by not only acknowledging it, but also doing the work of advancing equity in a meaningful and transformative manner. So I am so happy to see community here today, who will be at this table with us later during the presentation. I want to thank you at the start for your commitment and willingness to share your energy, expertise, skill set, and lived experiences, and staying at the table, because that's always the hardest part. We cannot do this work without your partnership. And thanks also to the county staff who are leading in this work with community. I will hand off now to our Chief of Staff, Maria Saravia, to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Moran, Chair Moran. So I have prepared comments because I'm going to try to stay on track here, but the first thing we're going to do is go through our agenda and just really acknowledge sort of the growth and the human element that like people are contributing to this body of work. It isn't an easy body of work. We were just in the board meeting talking about mental health and just all the other pressures that build up when we're doing big body work in governance and big systems, especially when you're trying to do a reverse engineer or redesign or deconstruct embedded inequities. And so that's really the body of the work that folks are here at the table. So I want to thank Lydia Germa and Kristen Schultz, who also have been leading this work. I just got here, I just came back, but they've been leading this work for some time as the sponsors for the strategic priority, as well as what we call the RIAs, the Racial and Health Equity Administrators. So William Moore, Veronica Jackson, and Angie Gunther serving in these roles, helping to cascade our work and have intentional and deep systems impact across our agency and across the enterprise. And then with the people, Ms. Elder Elfrida Flowers, thank you for joining us and being on the journey with us. Brother Giovanni Ford, thank you for being here and on the journey with us. And Elder Mary Kay Boyd, as well as Nicole Bean, I think is in the room, and she serves as the American Indian Community Coordinator. So lots of different perspectives, lots of different gifts and talents contributing to this work. And if we go to the next slide, I'll just share a little bit about racial equity and health equity and our shared community and power. Like that's, if we had a trifecta around racial and health equity and then community power, there's a lot of possibility and there's a lot of promise in this body of work. So in terms of racial equity, we understand it to be an intentional practice that addresses not only historical and systemic inequities that have disproportionately impacted racial and ethnic groups, particularly we know here in Minnesota, African-American groups as well as Native American groups, but other non-white bodied folks are impacted by these systems and by this construct of race. And we're working towards addressing the disparities here at Ramsey County. Doing that, we must share power with community, and that the way in which we do our work is embedded throughout all of our strategic priorities, and to do it in partnership. Knowing that we need to have shared community power so that we can actually operationalize throughout county, use different tools, leverage our policies or redesign policies, use planning and decision-making to honor the lived experiences and perspectives of communities that are impacted by our system. We hope to create and spark innovation in our service delivery models, as well as meet the specific needs of our populations. So those are the prepared comments, but I want to just say a few things from like my heart and say that, there was a time where this was very abstract or unsettling for folks, having this type of work being talked about, not just within my lifetime, but throughout the continuum in historical time. And so just asking for continued patience and grace from all of our leadership and that continued push that we know that we need to do better, even if we've made some progress along the way. And also knowing that the approach must be holistic, integrated, intentional. It may require some vulnerability, but to also push towards action and getting past some of the inner work to actually have external impacts and really have different experiences for our communities and for folks who are impacted, which we all are. This is an opportunity to really center our humanity. Folks know me, and I think the dehumanization of any person is a blemish on our humanity and on our society. And so to really be able to center our humanity and knowing that there's this racial hierarchy in this construct, and then we've now are in these systems working together, working holistically, working collectively, everybody playing their parts. There's going to be agitators, there's going to be activators, there's going to be folks, we all have to play our part in that work. And I'll just say, you'll hear more from community and you'll hear more from the SMEs and the subject matter experts, the leaders who are doing the work. But there was a time when we passed out a book called My Grandmother's Hand by Resma Menachem. And that was like to really humanize the work, understand this is an embodiment of the work. And I don't want to lose that part. And we need to do real structural systemic changes. And so it's the place where I feel like we're at this blend and this crossroad to really propel ourselves forward with strategy, with intentionality, with connection. And I'm honored to be at the table, and I'm going to pass it on to our next speaker, which I think is Will. Will has a lot of rich context to share about.
Yes, thank you. So I'll be talking about a bit about the racial equity journey that Ramsey County has been on. They say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, and so I think this is a nice representation of that. Although I also want to point out that this is not meant to be an exhaustive list. There's some things that we have done at the county here that is not reflected on this timeline. So I just want to make sure to point that out because there's been a lot of people in the organization, both present and past over, since left and gone other places that have contributed to get us to where we are today. But as we look at this timeline, some of the things that I think are pivotal that I really want to point out are things such as the partnership with the Haywood Burns Institute, which has seen, we've had approximately 100 or so leaders here at Ramsey County take part in different cohorts. I believe we're on cohort 3 at the moment right now, to really do some experiential learning and to see why as decision makers in a government institution, why our thought processes and why we do the work and matters, and also recognizing the power and authority that we have in the seats that we sit in. One of the biggest things that I just real briefly want to touch on is one opportunities got to see would be visiting a museum down there. And somebody who has, grown up in the South and raised by grandparents and heard firsthand about some of the experiences down there. I got to be honest and say, like, visiting the Civil Rights Museum was like hard to stomach. I actually didn't finish it. I left 3/4 of the way through. And I just think it's important to point out because we're living in a time where history is being erased. And it's opportunities and experiences like that that allow our leaders to see why the work we do is important and why we cannot forget why we're in a seat to do what we're doing, and why we need to remain have the courage to continue to do what we're doing. The next one of the other things on the timeline that I want to point out is RELT, Racial Equity Leadership Team being formed, which is a very important body of some of our leaders in the highest spaces here at Ramsey County, or the county manager, chief of staff, CHRO, race and health equity administrators, or DCMs. These individuals coming together to help really help troubleshoot and think about some of the bigger initiatives that we want to help drive through and get support through Ramsey County and make sure it's being filtered down through all levels of the county. I also want to point out the health equity officer being hired. That's important because that position evolved to be the roles that the three of us are sitting in now. It was pretty innovative and pretty, I would say, revolutionary at the time, at a time when a lot of organizations you couldn't even say anything about racial equity or racism. Ramsey County saw it a point to hire and bring on a health equity officer. And later, as we see in a timeline, that turned into the three of us being the race and health equity administrators, and also taking the time to invest FTEs in creating 10 RELs or race and health equity liaisons that do I would say do the more in the weeds work on a departmental level, whereas we do the work more of an organizational wide level. Also want to point out on there the different times that our receipts were being launched. So we have the Health and Wellness Service Team receipt being launched. We have the receipts being launched for EGCI, Safety and Justice, IPR, and then later on in 2023 and 2024, a strategic team. I really wanted to highlight those and point those out because that is an example of county work in conjunction with community to hear from community about our service delivery, right? We, as systems folks, we are smart people and think we have great ideas, but are those ideas really great if we're working in community and community say the way in which you envision that being working isn't impacting us the way that you want it to. So it's an opportunity for us to work in conjunction with community to hear about how our service delivery is, and then in a lot of ways co-create how do we reimagine how that looks to better serve the community in the best way possible. And then we're running short on time, so I'll move on to the next slide quick. And talk about the racial equity ecosystem. So very important. The reason that this is important is because there are a lot of organizations that are seeking to address racial equity and have an impact on racial equity for their communities. But a lot of times you see they really don't have the infrastructure to do so. They invest in one person, maybe two, to do all the racial equity work for an entire organization, which is very difficult. And a lot of times those individuals are asked to do it by themselves with no funding, so on and so forth. Ramsey County has invested in an entire ecosystem to do that. with our, in that, you'll see in the center of that, it's a community, right? We're doing this for a community, and in a lot of ways, we like to make this work, community led. Around that, you see coming around that are, the receipts, as we've talked about, those racial equity, community engagement action teams, right? So again, hearing from community about what's needed, taking that work back, to our different service teams, departments, trying to tailor our service delivery to that, but then also following back up with community and say, how are we doing? How do we need to change? What's working? What's not working? Sit with us, work in partnership with us, so that we are using our resources to the best of our ability. Right. And then we have, on the outside of that, we have our racial equity leadership team, what I've talked about. We have listed there county manager, chief of staff, policy and planning director, chief human resources officer, our American Indian community coordinator, who you'll hear from later on today, and our division DIOD division manager. And so all these individuals, this ecosystem is important because again, it builds out the infrastructure needed to carry on this work, right? You can't just expect this work to be done from the top down. But we also need top down, bottom up, middle, and everywhere else. And more importantly, making sure the community is involved in that, right? Because over time that we've done this work, and many organizations have claimed to do work for community, but never involve community in it, right? Never hear their input, never take their advice. And it's hard to look community in the eye and say, we do this for you, although we've never communicated with you, never taken your feedback seriously, or not implementing any of your suggestions.
You have a question here.
I have a quick question,
Yes, ma'am.
and it may just me understanding the infrastructure around on that last slide. The racial health and equity administrators and liaisons, the staff that are listed there.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious how, the different numbers of staff into the different service teams is determined. When I look at safety and justice and economic growth and community investment, it seems like those would be really key places for us to be investing in this work. And I'm curious, is there other roles playing that role, other work being done, or is that a place for growth?
I can take that one. What do you want to start?
I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, my response to that would be like, as you see it right now, like it's steadily evolving because once upon a time, you actually didn't even see liaisons helping in that spot. All of them were actually centralized in health and wellness, right? But as we saw the need for those positions and the support for with the race and health equity liaisons in these other spaces. It was then kind of through a series of meetings and conversations that it was thought, how do we look to expand the reach of the liaisons and to support the RIAs and supporting these other areas of growth, right? And so we see now through, Veronica is working with several of the race and health equity liaisons on our team through FAS, right? Angie is also utilizing some of the race and health equity liaisons and veteran services. And so, this is a model that, again, like I said, it's evolving. Hopefully we can see it grow even larger in the future as the need for of our departments and our community grows. But that's how that kind of like panned out.
So it's kind of like embedded throughout.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
So I'm gonna do a quick check-in. How many community members are speaking?
Just three of them.
3. So I want to do a check so that we can give some time to that piece. And so we have 10 minutes after, so at least by, I don't know, 11:30, 11:35 tops.
Yeah.
We should be wrapping up
Absolutely.
so we can get some
Yes,
time
ma'am.
to that.
Any more questions?
And we try to hold off on questions
All right.
as needed.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so as we saw in the racial equity journey slide, in 2024, the racial equity action plan was created. It's the first one, right? So it's a countywide action plan that the three of us use to embed a lot of the racial equity work throughout the county. Yes, all right. Okay, so there are strategies and actions. So there's 5 racial equity goals that we use. The next slide actually shows the examples of the work that has been within them. And then each plan, so you'll see like throughout that, they have to have specific goals that are measurable. Identify targeted strategies, and achieve goals, and include a plan that outlines metrics, right? So we want everything that we're doing to be able to be measurable. Just like any other work plan that you would see across the county. Next slide. And then here are, some of the strategies and priorities that have come out of that. So when we look at an equitable workplace culture, we have our inclusive and respectful workplace policy that was put forward by our compliance team. Workforce and leaders will reflect the demographics, and so that's the disaggregation by race and ethnicity of our current workforce that we have now. You saw some of that a couple weeks ago with the TARP conversation. Employees will understand core racial equity terminology and practices. And so that's our race and equity action being a part of new employee orientation. So that'll be a training that all new employees will be required to attend, just as a level setting coming into the county. And then planning and decision-making process will center racial equity and shared power. So that's our countywide advancing racial equity policy that should be launching here in the next couple months. And then operationalize racial equity and eliminate inequities in service quality and outcomes. And so this is where we're going to talk about the with the people engagement framework, which is why we gotta get through this so community folks can come up and talk about that. And then this is also our racial equity and community engagement action teams.
So I'll dig a little bit deeper into the advancing racial equity policy. As you saw in the timeline presented earlier, and as Veronica mentioned, Ramsey County adopted an advancing racial equity policy statement in 2019. As Will mentioned, that was really advanced for a local government to do so at that time. And the next year, the Board of Commissioners declared racism as a public health crisis after data showed that race and racism is a primary factor in disparate health outcomes. And we see those outcomes and trends continue across other quality of life indicators such as education attainment, employment outcomes, and wealth building. In 2023, Policy and Planning developed a core team to review the current policy statement and expand it to a full administrative policy. These core members engaged with different groups who would be uniquely impacted by this policy, including community members, to understand what they liked about the policy statement, opportunities for improvement, and what really mattered to them. Themes that came out of that engagement was a clear purpose and clarity, accountability and implementation, measuring progress and success, and communication and consistency, and finally, shifting organizational culture. So moving on that to start working on the new policy, the work group narrowed down the what and the why. First, we defined racial equity as the intentional and continued practice of addressing historical and systemic inequalities that have disproportionately affected racial and ethnically diverse groups, especially our Black and American Indian communities here in Ramsey County. As outlined in that Board of Commissioners declaration, race and racial equity matter at Ramsey County because race is a major factor that impacts life outcomes. And then we, as public service servants, have the responsibility to ensure that race no longer predicts life outcomes for our residents by prioritizing community well-being and sharing power in decision-making. We all have a role in this. We must see racial equity as all of our work. It is a through line that cuts through all positions and roles at the county, and this policy will formalize that expectation. A little more specifically, the purpose and scope. The purpose is to establish and formalize countywide racial equity goals that Veronica shared, those 5 goals. Those also are used to organize the racial equity action plan, so some through lines there as well. The policy offers support, guidance, and accountability measures for the implementation and alignment of racial equity efforts throughout the county so that we're all moving together to advance those goals. It is important to note that the Advancing Racial Equity policy is different from the Inclusive and Respectful Workplace policy, and they work together to advance racial equity. Issues related to employee conduct, such as microaggressions or individual discrimination, are covered in that policy, and this policy is more of the structural and systems work. The goals of this policy, the North Star, is to advance or achieve racial equity in Ramsey County. How will we know when we've done that? It'll be when all people who need access to the opportunities and services we provide receive them, not only through county services, but also through contracted goods and services. This policy applies to all employees in Ramsey County, though there are specific positions and roles that will have additional responsibility to make sure that this is happening and that we are accountable to the requirements. Another strategy that is outlined in our countywide racial equity action plan and in our strategic priority is the Racial Equity in Action Learning and Development course. This course helps employees to gain awareness of government's role in creating inequity. It provides shared foundational language to aid in normalizing racial equity via conversation and understanding. It provides information about the county's commitment to racial equity and how they as employees can get involved. DIOD, Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development, a division within HR, leads this work in collaboration with a number of other folks across the county. We're currently undergoing a retooling of Racial Equity in Action to be part of new employee orientation as the one day. It has been offered separately, and our future vision is to embed it in the regular practices, including new employee orientation. And we have a whole suite of other learning and development resources for folks who want to continue beyond Racial Equity in Action, including the development of Racial Equity in Action 2.0 as the next step in the learning continuum.
Can I ask you a question? Can you repeat how we will know this has been successful? What did you say?
When race can no longer be used to predict life outcomes and services through services.
After that.
Oh. Are you talking about the policy?
Yeah, we talked about the policies applies to all employees.
Oh, yeah.
Of the county.
Yep. So you want to know more specifically about what?
And I think you stated, you say, how do we know we have achieved this
Yes.
after you repeat it?
Race can no longer be used to predict life outcomes for any resident, and quality of life for all is improved.
And I just want maybe just to do a sidebar. I think we know has been achieved also when we no longer see the disparities
Yes.
that we see.
Yeah.
Right, when we see that, right?
Yeah.
That's an act of success.
Absolutely. And we have different metrics and processes outlined specifically in that policy, but it looks at evaluation of the racial equity action plans as well as our community indicators to track those specific numbers as well. Thank you for bringing that up. So with that, I'll hand it over to our interim Chief Human Resource Officer, Kristen, to talk more about racial equity in action.
So attendance at Racial Equity in Action training is tracked in the county's learning management system. You can see on the slide that the percentage of the workforce that's been trained has been steadily increasing, and you can see the goals that we've set for those rates at the end of 2025 and end of 2027. We're doing a really good job right now of getting new employees into the 4-hour in-person Racial Equity in Action training. All 3 new commissioners completed the training. So that was great to see. We have some work to do around getting existing staff through the training or through refresher training. We have a fair number of staff who've been through, we have a separate track that staff can go on where they complete 3 sessions of Racial Equity in Action training if they haven't been through the 4-hour in-person. And not all of those staff can get through the 3rd training.
Why?
So we have some work to do to get those
Can you
staff
say
through.
why they don't get through it?
Well, that's where we have to circle back with them and ensure that they get scheduled and complete the
Because
training.
I would think it's those staff that's been here for
Yep,
a number of years.
Longer.
Who need it probably most, because that behavior continues on. And
right. And it's part of the reason Angie mentioned that we're retooling the training going forward, and that's one of the reasons is because we recognize that staff weren't making it through the 3 parts. Probably due to scheduling and the amount of time that it takes. So that'll be part of the reformatting.
Commissioner.
Oh, yeah, just following up, I had the same thought, which is it offered, is it encouraged or required? This is different levels of emphasis as to the importance, and then is this for all staff or specific targeted staff? I know some of the cohort learning, was, focused on some leadership, but I'm catching this is for all staff.
It's for all staff. Yep, it is for all staff. It's mandatory for new staff. Circling back on staff who've been here for a while and getting them through the training has been the challenge. And is part of the reformatting.
And that is outlined in the advancing racial equity policy, so
Yeah.
it'll be formalized through that.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just seeing what your end of year goal is for 2025, pretty significant jump from 2024. So do you feel that you all are on track of hitting that?
We do. We trended it based on the fact that we're doing a good job getting new employees in. Those rates, you know, for 2027, we will probably never be at 100% because we have to factor in turnover. And also just our ability, the number of sessions that we are resourced to offer.
Commissioner Brewer.
I kind of wanted to go back to the, why we're not having some of our long-term employees or employees, completed. Could it be that they're just don't have the capacity and they need the time off? Like when we as new commissioners took it, I mean, we had the time, right? Like,
Yeah,
so is it having their supervisors and their team be set aside dedication time for them to do it and complete it so that they're not worried about completing their tasks that they have piled up of their everyday daily work?
yeah, I think that would be part of it. It's also, we need to provide more training sessions so that we
it's
can get
more.
those staff in. So some of it
Okay.
is, you know, just the resourcing of providing the training sessions.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So, I think that needs to be a priority and not an excuse. I think long-standing staff needs to have it, especially if they're in a leadership role, because change happens from the top down.
Yeah.
Not the bottom up. And so my hope is that when we come back in 2025, at the end of 2025, you can see more leaders, long-term leaders who have taken this training. And however you carve that out, for give them the opportunity to do it, you should carve it out, because it should be a priority.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm anticipating some of this is some folks are slow walking or not prioritizing, meaning
Yep.
individually or as departments, and having been required as in different roles to take CPR or whatever, or you're just pulled off the floor. I think, you know, I
Yeah.
think that there's a possibility of us, you know, again, there's a difference between encouraging and required, and there's difference between if we don't have the resources for programs, but if somebody's slow walking, then.
I think, I mean, there's a recognition too that the training has changed over time, the training that's been provided, and that we have a number of staff who maybe went through training more than 5 years ago that need to be retrained and get the current version of the training. It's all on our goals for what we're building out for the future.
We'll be looking forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you for naming that, and I think that provides good focus,
Mhm.
and direction, for you all about what's starting at the top too. In addition to that, I appreciate you naming that, you know, that encouragement or requirement would have to go for staff who have gone it again through it too. And I just mean this because in just my own personal journey of like learning about race and the impact of on the US history here and how I come into this being you know, a first generation American woman, right? The intersections of race and our histories are so interconnected, but it impacts us in different ways. And our language around race and what racial equity is has evolved to like by language to understanding and to being clearer about the path to dismantling racism in the United States. So I really do appreciate that recognition that we need, it's an evolving and learning process together.
Okay, let's continue.
With that, we will transition and invite our community members up. Oops. Can I bring that?
Just sit by me.
You want to sit?
We're on time.
Welcome to the board, very good. What's going on?
I'll kick off this slide and, but really, I hold space for community, and so I hope not to say too much and to give them the time. But we're gonna start with the history of what the With the People is. And then we have about 3 slides to go through, so with that, I'm gonna tee it up to Alder Mary Kane.
I'm back. Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Moran, Commissioners, and Manager Lindbecker. And please excuse my hoarseness. Between allergies and sinus, I will do my best, okay? I would like to say, first of all, I have been in and out of this county over many years. And some of you know I've held interim positions in the county, and I've often questioned some of the policies and the way that they were carried out. And so I kind of carried that with me as I exited. And then I had this opportunity back in 2020 in a conversation with a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Patricia Moore Harbor. I wish I had her picture here so that I just bring her spirit into the room because she has passed on. But she was an associate of the Kettering Foundation. And the Kettering Foundation is not grant making, it is a research foundation. And she acquainted me with this book called With. And I think all of you had it because I ordered it to be distributed among all the commissioners back then. And Dr. Harbor and I had many conversations. A good friend who had been the past president of the Kettering Foundation, David Matthews, is the author of this. And the more we talked about, Pat and I were always, we've got to do something, we've got to do something. And we talked about the county, and I talked with her about my experience, etc. And as you recall, the last time I was here, in the coach presentation, family coach presentation, I mentioned culture, relationship, trust, accessibility, and width. Now, in education, we do repeat some things sometimes so that we have recall. So I want you to keep those in mind. Can you repeat those? Culture, relationship, trust, accessibility, and width. Now, and width. And so width is, we've gone back and looked at everything that the county was about, all the words in terms of the vision, the mission, the this, the that, and it just seemed that this would fit. And so this was really starting on a path of changing the county's mindset to see community as active resources. The With the People work group, and here some of us are, is a collaborative that was initiated by people in the community in response to growing needs of community participatory government. This group weaves together the principles outlined in the Kettering Foundation's book, With the People. You're going to get sick of me, with the people, with the people. This group weaves together the principles outlined in the Kettering Foundation's book, With the People, and lived experiences to offer a human-centered and data-informed approach to community engagement. This new framework ensures that the government collaborates with residents and communities as active partners rather than passive consumers. By working with those who use county services, we can improve outcomes, decrease inequities, and increase trust in local government. And I want to say right here from my heart, I do believe that Ramsey County can be exemplary I really believe that. You know, Minnesota has a target on its back right now because of where we are. That's just the way it is. But I really think that Ramsey County, by lifting up this work and including it in all of the training, that I think you can be exemplary in this country. So by working with those who use county services, we can improve outcomes, decrease inequities, and increase trust in local government. That's very important. The work group will achieve this by partnering with community elders, leaders, and those with lived experiences to develop a framework to share power with community, develop and facilitate a development opportunity to educate leaders and staff on how to embed the framework and practices in their roles. Excuse me. Evaluate the framework's process and outcomes for continual quality improvement. Provide guidance, direction, and technical assistance to leaders and community engagement initiatives across the county. Identify additional training needs within departments or teams. Report and offer recommendations to continue. Oh, thank you. Got to bring my water up. To continue to improve community engagement and sharing power with community across the county. So that is the background, and here we are.
Yeah, so on this slide, it's our best way to capture what WITH is. It is not a B, C, D, if, Y, you know, there isn't a script or an equation, right? Like this is human work and it takes humans to do it. And so some of the language you see on the slide was taken from the pilot sessions that we did, and we got feedback of how do we name this and how do we share this with Ramsey County employees. And so it's a journey. And so by reading the WITH book, you're learning what that looks like, what democracy looks like through action with systems and people that are not working in the system, right? And those of us that work at the county, we're still human and finding that humanness in the work. And so the WITH framework is that mind shift, shifting the way we approach work. I gravitated toward this work in my role. I was like, this makes sense to me. Here I am. And that's how I got involved with the WITH group. And then I will point out the deliberative decision-making, that green circle on your book, it's page 19. So there is actually even a little bit a more in-depth diagram that shows what that looks like. How do we do that decision-making with collective learning, leaning into tension, leaning into those hard conversations. And it's okay because with we should have those relationships where we can do that with each other. So that's all I'll say about that.
If I can, I want to go back and touch based on this history piece. I really appreciate our brother sharing the journey. In our organization, we practice Sankofa. It's the Adinkra symbol of a bird that's flying forward while looking back. And it means we have to look back to understand where we're at, to determine where we're going. And so the historical piece of systems change in Minnesota, and specifically Ramsey County, is critical. As I was looking at that journey, it reminded me the importance of taking a balcony view. Back in 1993 and 94, I was asked by the Department of Human Services to direct a statewide systems change project that really mirrors the concepts that we're talking about with this WITH approach. So what the state was concerned about is Minnesota's changing ethnic demographic. This is early mid 90s, right? The state designed what was called an innovative project called the Cultural Beginnings Project. The goal of the project was to engage culturally specific communities from across the state to take a seat with the state to create a vision for a culturally responsive early childhood system. So I was hired as the director. My staff were community organizers from each of the 4 major communities of color. What that project, which was called Ahead of Its Time, the aim was systems change. But when I think about what's evolving here in Ramsey County with this it takes systems change one level deeper to talk about structural changes. In that project, there was two objectives. Number one is to build and strengthen capacity within communities to determine what healthy child development looks like, what our goals are, right? So self-determinizing, what does that mean in cultural communities? The second objective was to build and strengthen capacity within government systems to partner with communities. So the notion is, how do government systems help people help themselves? So this approach, this WIF approach, is about how do we move beyond transactional relationships between community and government towards a more transformative relationship. We are in it together, right? David Matthews often talks about with the people, right? John Dewey says the purpose of education is to renew the democracy. We have to envision new ways of being with one another. And so again, I appreciate that historical balcony view to this work.
I really appreciate that, and I wrote, as we saw this map forward, in order to really build trust and to really do this deep reflective work, my guess is that this is just one piece of this map, because it doesn't show the shadows, the blemishes, the outright missteps, the wrongs, the hurts, the patterns we continue to do, and I'm wondering, you know, I just look forward to, as we look back to inform our future, that we also are not afraid to face those. And I appreciate the emotional work that goes into naming things, and reflecting, but I appreciate that you folded us into that, and just want to call out to make sure that as we're doing this work, we're not just looking at the good stuff.
Yeah. More? Okay.
I just wanted to share, because my background has been working with families pretty much all my life. So about 50 years I've worked with families. But so I come with lived experience, and even starting an organization, Family Values for Life, so that we could be able to, work with, I saw the deficits many times within the St. Paul schools, because I worked with St. Paul schools a number of years and saw the deficits. So started an organization that we can work holistically with the family, working with again. And as I was thinking on yesterday, I thought about many times we think this whole concept of WIF is very difficult. It's hard, because as we were doing the pilot, it seemed like it was hard for some of the folks to really conceive it and visualize it. And so I thought about when my children, I'm a mom of 8 children, and when my children when they were first born, you're doing everything with them, for them. But then all of a sudden, when they get teenagers or older, if you don't include them in the decision-making, you're gonna have some resistance. So I wanted us to really think about this. We're already doing the work. If we are mom or have children or families, you're already doing it. And then I also thought about when I was working with St. Paul Public Schools, and I was working with families. Again, I was a homeschool liaison. And at that particular time, I was, parents needed assistance with IEPs. And many times the schools made the decisions for the families, especially children of color and male children at that. And so I had a mom come to me and said, I don't understand this. I need some help and some support. And so I began to go to PACER and other resources that I knew about from St. Paul schools, and work with the family, sat at the table with the mom and helped her with this IEP before she signed off. Because if you sign off, you've given away your rights. And so, but really to educate her and working with her really empowered her. And now her son, this particular son now is working for St. Paul Public Schools. So when you see these increases by working with and letting families know that they have power, and the community know that they have power, it's so awesome. I also wanted to share just a couple of things. I was talking with, a couple of the coaches, family coaches from Family Values for Life. And, they were here the last time we were here last month. And she said, during my time, this is Helen Howard, she said, during my time, working with Ramsey County to support coach families, I've consistently felt heard and supported. Thanks to the partnership, clients have been able to move into safer housing, pursue a complete their educational goals, and work towards more stable and fulfilling careers. Ramsey County's flexibility has made it possible to meet the unique needs of each parent and their households, whether they meant providing diapers, food, fuel, or ongoing case management. Your support, Ramsey County support, has empowered me to step in and assist families sooner rather than later, especially as they navigate some of life's most challenging stressors. That was just from one of them. And then the other one had, if I have a moment, just share this one. Our healthy mom, healthy babies coach with Family Values for Life. She is also in partnership with Ramsey County, said that Ramsey County has been very instrumental in creating a thriving space for coaching. I don't have a lot of work directly with Ramsey County, but the resources and training has been powerful for my work. This partnership has enabled me to effectively support and empower moms within the community. I have had the privilege to create a significant impact on community with this collaboration, empowering African American mothers, parental 12-month by offering essential resources and guidance, supporting them on their maternal growth and journey, and creating nurturing environment along and fulfilling mothers' needs, navigating and challenging with confidence. And this was from Elijah Jackson, our other family coach. So I just wanted to share that many times when Ramsey County has stepped in and we're working with, and this has helped us to get the job done, to really include our African American families, which are their disparities are so great. And but working with, I find myself on a whole different level, starting an organization and now at the table with the commissioners. I really appreciate this opportunity because, again, I'm advocating in another form. So thank you.
I'd just like to say in closing too, before we move on to that, most of you know that my background is in education. And I've probably said before you, my students taught me so much.
Yes.
It wasn't what I learned academically at the university classroom, but by working with, as you said, as the children get older, you better work with them because they're not going to do just because you said do. You don't really have the power, especially with the senior high. And so I learned a lot about working with because I wasn't allowed to have power over, and I appreciate that. Also, Pat and I, Dr. Harper and I could not have forwarded this without working with others. And so we reached out to people in the community as well as people like Prince Corbett and people in the county. And there again, I do nothing alone, nothing. I have to work with in order to come to some kind of a resolution. So thank you for this time.
I can offer one other brief example of how Ramsey County is working with community. The project that I mentioned earlier, the Culture Beginnings Project, one of the outcomes was the creation of the organization that I founded with community 27 years ago. Our focus of our organization is helping children and parents and community connect literacy, education, and identity and self-determination. And so our program designs have resulted in increased school attendance, increased academic performance, reading skills, and because of the unique relationship and partnership with Ramsey County, we can now say that our program models impact and change the trajectory of African American families who are participating in TANF or MFIT. A number of years ago, county leaders came to community elders looking for some community solutions to address the disproportionality of African Americans participating on TANF in Ramsey County. The elders brought them to NIDCAD, to our organization. We don't do employment services. We do literacy and identity for the whole family. But when the elders brought county leaders to NIDCAD, we were able to sit and really learn together with one another. And we were able to co-create a partnership that allowed us to do what we do, allow the county and employment service agencies to do what they do, so that we could really build a hedge of support around the families. The one caveat that we had in the design is our board said, let's move forward with this co-created partnership. And the county must designate an evaluator to document and describe how the literacy identity work that we do translates to increased employment, job skills training, and all of the metrics that the county is accountable for. And what that evaluation continues to show is that because we're working with one another from the inception of the partnership to this and how we actually carry it out, it's because of that partnership that the county can report to DHS and to the feds that a difference is being made. We couldn't do it on our own. The county can't do it on our own, but together opens up the possibilities, right? This is the essence of what the spirit of democracy is about. It's about all of us.
So you have shared some of the great work and relationships that Ramsey County has with community. Can you talk about what has not worked or things that we can do better?
Well.
We look to the elders.
We don't have a whole lot of time.
Okay.
However, I think that everyone needs to be trained. We don't really know. You can put people through training sessions, but you don't know their hearts because sometimes they don't know their hearts. And I don't care what position you're in. I don't care if it's a higher position or a position that's an entry position, whatever. There are some people in some places that shouldn't be there. And depending upon others to make it right, no, that's our job. We've got to make sure that it's done in a way that it's not just a kind of an overall glossy kind of, oh, we're going to do a training. People can go through and they can, when they're in front of you, they can do what they think you want them to do. However, they need to find out what's inside of them because perhaps this job is not the job for them. So just saying, something to think about.
I would add to that. I think there's room for improvement in terms of capturing and describing and transferring institutional knowledge around this work. I heard one of our native elders tell me a number of years ago, systems folks have very, very short memories, but the people never forget.
That's right.
And so documenting and describing it, institutional change and structural change is a journey and it's iterative. And when I was listening earlier and see some of the younger folks describing this work, I'm like, wish I was there when I was that age, there in the minds. But if we don't, as a government system, keep track of and be able to describe how the changes are happening, then the younger generation, the new commissioners, have to recreate rather than build upon. And so that would be my one hope in terms of a future of sustainability and regenerative change, which I think is we owe that to the future commissioners and citizens of Ramsey County, who are right now 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old.
We're not always like starting.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Commissioner Jones, and then Garrison.
Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback, and I also really appreciate you coming to the table again and again. As one of the newer commissioners, and also just knowing the 2020, that's when the county overall has started. It's like, what do you think can catalyze the work, and catalyze the change? Because I represent the part of the east side of St. Paul where we have some of our youngest people and people who are showing up in our JDC who are being, taken away from their homes. And those are all, it impacts all of us. And we also have some of like the lowest participation in the workforce among working age adults. What do you think are some of the things we can do to catalyze this change?
One, I think we're gonna have to continue to have community at the table. I think that's gonna be just so important. Elder Mary Kay and I, at the beginning of COVID, when we were called to EAC, it was like a call to action. We need community. And community has been involved ever since then. I mean, we had said that we're just gonna sit at this table until we get some things changed. Now COVID is gone just about, you don't hear of it like it was before, and things want to move back into the same place, but we're here at the table. So I think you're gonna have to continue to keep community at the table.
I think we have to recognize that we need to partner with other systems.
Yes.
The education system is one that really needs to be partnered with.
Don't do it by yourself.
I believe that it's not really understood by those outside of that system and many inside the system, the trauma that so many children bring to school. And what we are about is wanting to make sure that we address that in a way that it is not continuing generation after generation by keeping families together. And like the family coach, which we brought before you before, that's one way we can try to address that. There are several, but systems working separate are going to have to work with each other, not only breaking down the silos within your particular institutional system, but other systems as well.
That brings my mind right back to when St. Paul Public Schools, we had to bring PACER. We had to come together. We had to bring that system together because they were advocates for IEPs.
That's right.
Commissioner Mnuchin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you all again for being here and being part of this conversation. And you spoke to the journey that we're on. This weekend will mark the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and all of that pain and that hurt that still exists, and the work that I think that we have done since the murder of George Floyd, but still acknowledging that there's still a lot of work ahead of us. And I would say that now we're entering a time where it's even in some respects harder to do this work, where you see entities that tout their service to our communities, but are still rolling back a lot of the things that they said they were going to do. Entities that want our money, want us to shop there, but are still rolling back their commitment to doing this work. And so I commend the county and all of you for continuing to do this work, to say that we're not going to, just change the meaning behind it. We're calling a spade a spade. This is racial equity work. This is important work that we have to continue to do for the benefit of our entire community. And, Elder Mary Kay, you mentioned how there's an opportunity for us as a county to do exemplary work. And I couldn't agree more. You were sitting at a table where we have the most diverse county board in the state of Minnesota. There is no reason why we should not be doing exemplary work in this. And so I want to commit myself and also, of course, challenge all of my colleagues to continue to do this work with community, to continue to think boldly, to be innovative, to think outside the box of how we can move this work forward, because it's so important. And I can't thank you all enough for the work you've done in the last few years, but more importantly, the work that you've done prior to that, leading to this moment and getting us to this place. So I just really appreciate that.
So with our 3 minutes left, you summed it up really good. You know, and I'm gonna try to sum it up, because I believe, one, let me just say, I want to thank Ramsey County for that long history of engaging community and trying to engage community and being on task to do that. I do want to, as we look at this here, piece here of what that has looked like, from 2005 to 2017, there's a 12 years where we was quiet, that nothing happened. Okay, just want to acknowledge that, because we can repeat those things if we're not intentional in what we're trying to do here to take us forward. And I'm going to sum this up in the lens of looking at what government needs to do to work to ensure that we are creating an ecosystem, not an ego system, that is embedded in our work through partnership with community and the action teams. We have to be intentional. And so race and racial equity matters. We're saying it matters in Ramsey County because race is a major factor that impacts life outcomes. I wish it didn't, but it does. And that is not a burden for the community, it's a burden for the government who's making decisions. And so it impacts life outcomes, and because government plays a role in creating and perpetuating these systemic inequities, we see it happening right now in real time. And as a public servant, it is the county's responsibility to ensure that race is no longer that race no longer predicts life outcomes for our residents. That is incumbent on Ramsey County to lead that way as a system. And so Ramsey County leadership and staff, you know, I know that we can't always touch people's hearts, but I think we need to make a requirement for every staff from leadership down to take this racial equity in action training for many different reasons, right? We can't transform people's hearts, but it's also a predictor of resistance to change when it doesn't happen. And so we have to make some decisions about that and what that looks like. Cultural relationship, trust, and accessibility happens with community. So we're going to keep reiterating the with, and the with, because that would just create stronger outcomes and results that we want. I am a true believer, and I think many of us around this table, is that people want the best for themselves and their family, and they want to lead through that. But there have been systems that did not allow that to happen. Intentional. And so here in Ramsey County, cultural relationship, trust, accessibility, and doing the work with is a priority that we have committed to moving forward. We have to look back in order to go forward. Patterns will continue if we do not, as Commissioner Jefferson talked about. If not, we will find that we are doing it. If they are not doing it with us, community is not doing it with us, they will be resistant to, staff will be resistant to the change. I hope I capture Elder Flowers, your words. If they are not doing it with us, that will be county. They will be resistant to change. And so I just want to say to our community members that I know well, and you know, sometimes we say we're tired, but we stay at the table. We stay at the table, right? And so Ramsey County is committed to also staying at the table to move us forward together with community. And so I just want to thank you all for just being here today.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, baby.
All done with me?